This is a colossal weapon from the DLC. Most players see this weapon and slop on a status infusion. 200 build-up per hit seems like a no-brainer until I started testing, and that's when everything changed. What if I told you that popular setup is actually holding the weapon back? Today, we are breaking down the absolute best way to build this weapon, and it's probably not what you expect. I started where every good build begins, by taking a real look at the weapon itself. The weapon upgrades with standard smithing stones, which means you can swap its Ash of War, and even better, its affinity to suit your build. So the first big question: what is the best infusion for the Bloodfiend's Arm? Your entire playstyle depends on it. First, I decided to ask you guys to see what most people actually use with it. And nearly 90% of you said the blood affinity. Totally understandable. It leads to high amounts of bleed buildup. It makes sense to lean into that. But is that actually the optimal infusion for Bloodfiend's Arm? To answer that, I set all stats at 60 across the board to see which infusion comes out on top. And these are the results: cold, fire, heavy, poison, blood, magic, lightning, keen, occult, and standard all came in with low numbers. Third place is Flame Art, coming in at 2004. Second place is Quality, dealing 2018. And topping the list, Sacred, hitting for 2081 damage. In fact, if we rank all Elden Ring weapons, including the DLC ones, a Sacred Bloodfiend's Arm ranks number 6. It actually makes sense for it to be the highest infusion. Still, to be thorough, Blood and Cold deserve a fair shot thanks to their damage over time, which doesn't show in a damage test. To determine the definitive best among them, I put all 4 through the exact same setup. Same enemy, same moveset, same pace, and a stopwatch in hand. And the results? Quality was last with a full minute to take down Bale. Surprisingly, both Cold and Blood led to the exact same time, 56 seconds. You literally cannot make this up. The shocker, Sacred wins again in DPS with 53 seconds. The damage from earlier was a good indicator of what this weapon excels at. So the answer is Sacred Affinity? Case closed? Well, not quite. There is this idea that Holy falls off in endgame because bosses are heavily resistant to it. But that is not entirely true, at least not in the DLC. Holy, in my opinion, is optimal for the bosses that matter the most in the DLC. Not to mention, the Bloodfiend's Arm with Sacred doesn't deal pure holy damage. 57 of its damage is still physical, so even if a boss resists holy, you are still chunking them with physical hits. The verdict? For the DLC, Sacred is not just viable, it is optimal. For the base game, probably not optimal, but I'm pretty sure it will just do fine. Now, for the next critical decision, how do we maximize the weapon's high damage potential? It all starts with our Ash of War. The default Ash of War is alright, but we want high damage numbers. That's why we need to find an ideal alternative. Ash of Wars for the Bloodfiend's Arm fall into 2 categories: active skills, which deal direct damage, and buff skills, which enhance our weapon's attack. We are going to find the best of each category and put them head to head. First up, active skills. We are looking for raw DPS here. To do that, we need the damage of the skill and how long it takes to execute. The results are as follows: Thunderbolt, Golden Slam, Earthshaker, Stamp 2, Stamp 1, and Golden Land all had low to mid DPS values. At number 3, Playful Strikes with a DPS of 13.3, not too shabby. At number 2, Lightning Slash with a DPS of 14.4, really solid. And at number 1 is Lion's Claw with a DPS value of 17.2. With fast execution and massive damage, Lion's Claw dominates this category. Now, for buff skills, which power up our next hit? Sacred Blade, Crag Blade, Sacred Order all had low damage numbers. At number 2, Determination with a damage of 4,389. And at number 1, Royal Knight's Resolve with a damage of 4,855. Royal Knight's Resolve reigns supreme. It boosts your next attack by 80%, making it the strongest weapon buff available on Bloodfiend's Arm. But since it buffs an attack, what is the best attack to pair it with? And of course, we tested them all. Light attacks are quick, but only hit a DPS of 10. Standard heavy attacks are better at 14.3. But the winner? Royal Knight's Resolve plus a charged heavy attack, the highest single hit. So now that we have our two contenders, Lion Claw for active burst and Royal Knight's Resolve plus a charged heavy for buff damage, we need to test both of them for their DPS to see which one is the best. Lion's Claw hits a 17.2 DPS value. Royal Knight's Resolve plus a charged heavy hits an 18.6 DPS value. Confirmed, the Royal Knight Resolve playstyle comes out on top. It is more damage, more efficient, and simply the best option. That said, the gap is really close between the two. You honestly cannot go wrong with either. So after locking in our Infusion and Ash of War, the next big question is, what buffs actually work with Royal Knight Resolve and a charged heavy? Because here's the truth, not every damage boost is worth using. First, what does not work? Shard of Alexander, 0% increase with Royal Knight Resolve. Does not work. Sacred Scorpion Charm boosts Holy by 12%, but on this weapon, only a 4% gain. Not worth it. Sword of Light, 20% Holy boost, but gives just a 7% here. Also not worth it, and we will know why in a little bit. Now, what actually works? The two-handed talisman gives about 13% bonus as long as you are two-handing, and it stacks with Royal Knight's Resolve. The Axe Talisman is perfect for the charged heavy playstyle, 10% bonus and stacks with Royal Knight Resolve. Flame Grant Me Strength, 13% bonus, reliable and better than Sword of Light since they don't stack. Golden Vow, a very consistent 15% buff. A Holy Shrouding Crack tier, only a 7%, but hey, it's better than nothing, so it's worth it. And the Rakshasa armor, an 8% bonus, safely stacks with the rest. Before we get to the build, there's one last thing you need to know. This weapon doesn't just hit hard, it staggers fast. And that changes everything. A fast stagger lets you shut down boss attacks, skip annoying moves, and turn transitions into free damage windows. This isn't just about raw numbers, it's about controlling the fight and breaking the game's hardest bosses before they break you. Alright, so after all that testing, time for the ideal Bloodfiend's Arm build. First, the weapons. We are running a Sacred Bloodfiend's Arm plus 25 with Royal Knight's Resolve as an Ash of War. You can grab the Bloodfiend's Arm very early in the DLC. You can find it in Prospect Town, right here. In your offhand, grab an Erdtree Seal, no need to upgrade, just to cast buffs. Now, into armor. Go full Rakshasa set, head, chest, arms, and legs. It fits the brutal look, plus gives 8% bonus damage and over 51 poise, perfect for safe trades. For the talismans, you want buffs that make every hit count. Go for the two-handed talisman, which gives a 13% bonus while two-handing. Second, the Axe Talisman. It increases the damage of your charge heavies by 10%, perfect for our build. Third, the Dagger Talisman. It gives a 17% crit damage boost, which is great since this weapon staggers a lot. And finally, Blade of Mercy. It gives a 20% increase after a critical. The setup we use will stagger bosses constantly and feed into the buff loop of Blade of Mercy and Dagger Talisman. For your physic, here is the combo I recommend. The Holy Shrouding Crack tier for that 7% increase for 3 minutes. And pair it with the Stone Barb Crack tier, which makes staggers even easier to achieve. For the buffs, you will want Always Active, Golden Vow for that 15% increase, and Flame Grant Me Strength for that 13%. For the recommended stats, 50 to 60 Vigor to tank hits and trade safely, 10 to 15 Mind, enough FP for our build, 31 Endurance to keep a medium equip load and have enough stamina to work with, 28 Strength required to wield the weapon, 11 Dexterity, just the minimum as well, 60 Faith to scale our holy damage. And here's something I figured out while testing the weapon. You can go up to 80 in Fate, and you will get great returns for your levels. Just forget the soft cap and level up to 80. And finally, 16 Arcane for the minimum requirement. Your pre-fight rotation is simple. Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, Dual Wield, FP Flask, Wondrous Physic, and then Fog Wall. Once inside, Royal Knight's Resolve, find your opening and charge your heavy, and just repeat. Simple, effective, and brutal. Stop handicapping yourself with the wrong infusion, at least for this weapon. Build for Holy, leverage Royal Knight's Resolve, and use your charged heavies. You will melt the hardest bosses the DLC has to offer. And if you want a build for this weapon optimized for the base game, let me know in the comments, because the approach to building into it would be different. And thank you again for the votes and being active in the comments from the recent videos. Much love. Meanwhile, if you want to see my last video on the iconic katana, Moonveil, click right here.
Bye.